In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be previewing the upcoming matches against Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League and Parma in the Serie A, as well as reviewing the game against Sassuolo, this week's Moggi, Moratti and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on SempreInter.com.
Per De Vrij, c'è la torre per Messina, l'ha presa! L'ha ripresa Messina! L'ha ripresa Messina! Il toro! Il toro! Il toro! Il tiro! Samir! Bambanovic! La recupera Brozovic, andiamo in contropiede, la porta è vuota, tira, attenzione, e gol!
Bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I'm your host Nima, Tavallaey, wishing you welcome back after a longer break than we would have wanted. One where health issues, especially on my part, prevented us from recording and all that jazz. But let's not dwell on that too much. We're back now with a jam-packed panel, starting with the SempreInter preview writer, Mr. Positivity himself, Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
Hey guys, jam-packed week ahead of us indeed. Fantastic to have started the week off with a win, so onwards and upwards.
Yes, and we are also joined by our good friend all the way from Toronto. He works for TSN, Mr. Michael Gallo.
Benvenuti, how's everyone doing? I'm currently in a room I've never been in before, and the room has a sign that says Milan to Bologna, Bologna to Florence, Florence to Rome, Rome to Naples. I don't know what it means, but I'm glad I picked this room because I'm staring in front of this sign, and I have no idea why it's here, but I'm glad I picked this room, and that means we're gonna have a great show, I guess.
Yeah, that was. I hope you figure out where you are at some point.
I've got a picture, and I'll send it to you guys afterwards. I don't know why it's in here. It's not like I'm in Italy. I'm in Canada, but it's here, and I'm excited.
Well, I sure was excited and not one bit jealous at all when you were in Italy, especially when you were in the vineyards. Anyway, let's not dwell on that. We are also joined by our very good friend who took a sabbatical from Studio Inter due to family stuff, but he's back for this game. He supports Liverpool, he supports Borussia Dortmund, but above all, he supports Inter. Welcome back, Mr. Critty Smith.
Finally, Critty has come back to SempreInter. I don't do it quite as well as The Rock does, but you get my point.
Yes, we do. We most definitely get your point.
And you smell what the Critty's cooking.
That sounds gross. That sounds so gross. Right, let's not dwell on that. And we are also joined by for the first time, he covers Borussia Dortmund for ESPN FC. He's the network manager over on One Football, the German edition, and he's the editor-in-chief and host of the English-speaking Borussia Dortmund pod called the Yellow Wall Pod, making a Studio Inter debut. Welcome, Mr. Stefan Buczko.
Hello. Yeah, I only have Gritty because I'm in Philly, so no Critty from me. But it's nice to see you, Critty.
Nice to see you as well.
Good not to be completely alone here.
Yeah, not alone.
Well, that's the thing, because we wanted to bring Critty on because obviously he's an Inter fan and a Borussia fan, so we thought it would be awesome if he could join us for this one. Well, first of all, Stefan, I wanted to ask you a little bit because a lot of people who listen to this pod will not have maybe paid as much attention to Borussia Dortmund after Jurgen Klopp left. So a lot of things have happened. A lot of players that left when he left are back now again, and you have a new coach, Lucien Favre. I don't know if I pronounced his name properly. So I wanted to ask you a little bit. What is your opinion on this new BVB? Are they? I mean, if you compare them to the Klopp team, do they still have the same philosophy in place, or how do they play?
No, not at all. Lucien Favre actually changed it quite dramatically when he came in. He talked a lot about balance, and Dortmund under Jurgen Klopp obviously really brought the whole counter-pressing into the Bundesliga, and now Dortmund are a much more conservative team that sits back more and more, and they still press every now and then situationally, but not as much. I would say Lucien Favre actually has the best Dortmund squad at his disposal in quite some time. Maybe the team that reached the Champions League final in 2013 was a little bit better on paper, but in overall roster, Lucien Favre has a much better squad, which is why Critty and I are a little bit disappointed at how Dortmund's season so far is going, I assume.
Well, speaking of that, I wanted to let Critty maybe ask you a little bit, ask you a question about if I'd be given that he has maybe, or he has much better knowledge. Critty?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to follow up with what Stefan was saying. In terms of Lucien Favre, it is a different team. However, it seems like Dortmund, especially even going back to Peter Bosz in 2017-18, yeah, 2017-18. Then last year, 2018-19, and this year again, they always have they've gotten off to really good starts. First 5-6 games, they jump out to the top of the table. And with Peter Bosz, it was about 7 games in, they started to slide back. With Lucien Favre, it was into the Rückrunde last year, where they actually second half of the season, where they started to sort of to deteriorate. They let a 9-point lead slip against Bayern to finish second place. And this season again, they first 3 weeks they looked like they were on fire. And then there's always this this sort of this balancing out, if you will, where I guess maybe people adjust to their tactics, they start to figure things out. With Dortmund right now, there's so much there, if from the United States perspective of watching the game on Fox FS1 this past week, they're already talking about Lucien Favre on the hot seat, about this is a guy who is they're 1 point off of first place, but there's a lot of turmoil within the fan base, I guess you could say. There's a split divide, if you will, and you can see that if you're on Twitter. You can see that they're definitely your pro Favres and your anti Favres, and it has a lot to do also with the lineups that he puts in. A lot of people can't agree on whether Hazard should play or whether Roy should play outside, whether he doesn't really typically like to start at the top of the order. But last week, due to the fact that Alcácer was out and Götze also had the flu, I know that there's a lot of little things like that have created this this sort of I don't want to. It's not a cause for major concern, but it's just kinks in the armor, so to speak. That said, I mean, Stefan, where do you think things go from here with Dortmund? And I have my opinion, but I want to hear yours in terms of does Götze even have a future here? What's to happen? Are they going to get another striker in the Winterpause? Like what exactly does Favre have up his sleeve to try and take advantage of the weakest Bayern side we've seen in many years?
Well, welcome to this half-hour special edition of the Yellow Wall Pod. I honestly think that Lucien Favre is actually on a hot seat because he is not managing this team to its full potential, and I think the style of football that he wants to play is not really in accordance with how Borussia Dortmund fans want their team to play. Obviously, Dortmund are trying to find another number 9 because Paco Alcácer is, he's sort of a false 9 type-ish player. Mario Götze is not, and also I think on his way out, he actually might end up at Inter. I don't know, but that's where the rumors led.
Like in the summer, in the summer they were talking about it, and
he could leave on a free transfer, and my wife has notified me that Mario Götze is sharing a lot of posts on Instagram because he and his girlfriend, or now wife, frequent the city quite regularly. So this is something to ponder on.
I can confirm that. That's true.
To answer the question more in more broad terms, I think we at the Yellow Wall Pod are a little bit more in the anti-Favre camp. Like I don't have anything against him. I just don't think it's going to be something that works out in the long term, and I could see Dortmund actually replacing him at the end of the season. But let's more focus on the Champions League game ahead, I would say, because that's more pressing.
But so Götze isn't injured. He's just not. He's just not. They just Favre just doesn't want to play him.
The problem with Mario Götze is, to answer that real quick, and it's not quite publicly known, but he has a metabolic disorder. Where his body retains too much water every now and then, and usually it is so that Mario Götze needs a long time to really get going into a season. So the first couple of months he just didn't feature much, and everyone, me included, scratch their heads why that is. That could be a reason. Now, Mario Götze last season was one of the main performers, especially in the second half of the season, to get Dortmund where they were, even though they slipped down in the table. He was still one of their best players, so it's quite questionable why he didn't feature more. And now when he plays, usually he plays quite well, but it's not that he is an instant starter and has to really fight for his spot. Lucien Favre is not quite sure where he should fit in. He has played him as a number 9 or a false 9 most of the time, but obviously this is not Mario Götze's best position. He's more of a 10 or a number 8, where he functions best. So yeah, it's difficult for Götze, and I just don't think right now, with his contract running out in 2020, what could happen for him to change his mind to actually extend with Dortmund, because he is not one of the faves under Lucien Favre. So it's difficult, and I don't know if he will play on Wednesday. He had the flu and wasn't featuring against Gladbach, so there's a good chance that he will be available, but then actually not play.
Nima, Nima, two things to Götze real quick. A lot of people would argue that he was their best player in the second half of the season last year, and secondly, there is an ongoing conspiracy that many people believe that Lucien Favre has something personally against Mario Götze, specifically in terms to his non-signing of his contract renewal, which has been highly talked about because they want him to take a wage cut. And so Götze has refused to sign any kind of extension because I guess he believes that he's not worth the wage cut. He should be making just as much, if not more, than he currently is. So there is a, I don't know if I would say small contingency. There are people in the Dortmund camp that do believe that Götze is being blacklisted by the club.
Cool. Good to know. Mo, do you have a question for Stefan?
Yeah, Stefan, I wanted to ask you, so I'm pretty much the optimist here, but also quite an Anglo-skeptic. And one of the things that I find, quite annoying is how the English press really overhype players, overhype their own league, etc., etc. So how good really is Jadon Sancho? Is he as good as people on the outside are led to believe through the English media, or is he still more of a work in progress? And where would you rate him as, one of the threats that Dortmund will pose going forward to teams that they meet in Europe?
Well, I think in terms of a skill player, he actually deserves the hype, which is rare, and I agree with you. I think the English press terribly overhypes players, but in this case, I think it's actually justified and warranted. That being said, he is still a work in progress when it comes to the defensive contributions on the pitch. This is just where he makes a lot of positional errors, doesn't close down spaces quick enough, and doesn't recognize the space. It's not like he's lazy or anything. It's just in terms of he still has to learn as a 19-year-old. And Critty, I don't know if you want to expand on this, but he actually was suspended from the last game because of a disciplinary measure.
No, nothing to expand on. I as far as that disciplinary measure, but I agree with you 100% that he's worth all the hype in terms of skill as a skill player. But let's not take into forget Mo. He's also only 19 years old. He's already playing international football for the English national team, and the guy is actually one of the players. If you look at players like maybe I would say Serge Gnabry, maybe there's a couple of other examples. He's in no rush to leave Dortmund. He knows that this is a great learning experience for him. He's getting regular starting minutes every single week. He seems very comfortable with the country, with the style of play, with the time he's getting at Dortmund, and the development that he's also receiving. So when and if he does eventually go back to the Premier League, I think that's more of when and not if. He came from City, obviously, to Dortmund, and this has been this is as good an example of the development culture at Dortmund as you will ever see. I mean, he's come from basically nothing but raw potential, and he's one of the top young players in the Bundesliga by a mile. So he's definitely one to keep your eye out on. And I think that when his time at Dortmund's up, that his name will be spoken for many years to come.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think there will be a record fee for him in some sense, but I'm actually not sure whether he will end up in the Premier League, because I can really imagine him either joining Barcelona or Real Madrid in La Liga. So this is something to watch out for. It's going to be a huge deal either at the end of this season or next season.
I think one thing you touched on there, both of you, this talent development. I mean, everyone talks about Ajax, but if you look at the players that have come through at Dortmund these past few years, it's pretty crazy, to be honest. Not just these past few years, I'd say for the past decade. It's really the talent factory that Dortmund are. Right, Mike, did you have a question for Stefan?
Yeah, actually, you guys kind of just touched on it. My question was about Sancho because I noticed he didn't play against Mönchengladbach on the weekend. And what I read was that he was dropped by Favre because he showed up late to Dortmund after the international break. And I mean, it's not always good to have these types of tensions with it, especially with a new manager. But and from what Favre said, he said it's a discipline measure, and tomorrow's a new day, so it doesn't seem like it could be more than just that one match. But I mean, Stefan, there's no way that he could potentially be out of the match on Wednesday, could it?
No, he will be well rested for Inter, I would say. Yeah, I have to qualify this a little bit if people want to jump to conclusions, because Jadon Sancho usually is not someone that acts out. He's a very humble young guy. I got to interview him a couple of times already, and he has both feet on the ground. The sporting director Michael Zorc said that sometimes he tests out his boundaries, and he was one day late from the national team. Nothing really that will create a panic in Dortmund, and I don't think he will take it poorly or so. I think he will just take the right consequences, learn from it, and move past it very quickly. I don't think it's a big issue. So Jadon Sancho was a bit out of form in recent weeks anyway. So I'm actually quite glad that he got another break. So it's all the better for Wednesday night.
Stefan, I got one more question if you don't mind me asking. Last year, I had actually it was earlier this year in February, I was able to go to the Dortmund Spurs game in Dortmund. It was my first time ever being at Dortmund Stadium, and I was with some Dortmund supporters, and they told me that it's a much better atmosphere to go on, say, for a Bundesliga match on a weekend than comparing to a Tuesday or Wednesday night match in the Champions League in a group stage. I've obviously never been to a Bundesliga match at the stadium where Dortmund plays, but maybe given the circumstances when Dortmund was already down 3-0 going into that second leg, is that the case at their stadium? Do they care more about the Bundesliga matches because it's a weekend, it's not a weeknight? It's just something that I was very interested in because I've always pumped up a Champions League match compared to like a league match, depending on the circumstances.
No, I wouldn't say that this is the case. I've been to I don't know how many Champions League and Bundesliga games, and obviously it's true the Westfalenstadion will be converted to an all-seater game due to UEFA regulations for the Champions League, which is then it only fills like 66,000 instead of 80,000. So obviously the roar of the yellow wall is a little bit dampened, but not too much. And I think the Westfalenstadion usually lights up for European nights. I was also there for that game against Spurs, and yeah, that wasn't the best Dortmund atmosphere you can experience. That's true. I mean, if Dortmund play against Real Madrid or I guess Barcelona as well, and other, there have been so many Champions League games where the atmosphere was probably better than for a regular Bundesliga match there. I would say if Dortmund actually play at home to Bayern or Schalke, the really big Bundesliga games, then the atmosphere is a little bit better just because there are more people in the stadium that can create more noise. But the good thing about the European nights is really that people on the main stands actually chime in and not just let the little ultra section do their work through 90 minutes. So that's very different. So yeah, no, the atmosphere in the second leg against Inter should be very good as well. So yeah, don't count on Dortmund fans taking it.
I mean, I wanted to focus a little bit on this particular game. I mean, I'm looking through the Borussia Dortmund squad, and it's full with players that have won the World Cup, that are young stars. I mean, you have a star-studded Dortmund have a star-studded squad. I'm kind of keen to think, because Inter have 1 point, Dortmund have 4. This is a game that Inter have to win. There's no doubt about it. If Inter don't win against Dortmund on Wednesday night, it's over for Inter, because Inter will then have to go to Westfalenstadion and try to win there, and in order to have any shot at qualifying. So how do you expect Borussia or Lucien Favre to approach this game against Inter, knowing all of this?
I would say on the back foot. Knowing how Favre operates, I think Dortmund will not try to press overly. And the good news for Dortmund is one of their biggest weapons is their counterattack. And so far this season, they haven't been able to show it very frequently, just because most teams actually sit back against them. And so I do wonder how it plays out. That being said, there's one big weakness for Dortmund, and that is when they are actually 1-0 up, because I've looked it up on Underset the other day, and I was actually quite shocked. Dortmund on average per 90 minutes concede an expected goals value of 3.21, so around about 3 goals per game if they play the way they play when they are 1 goal up. So this has been a massive issue under Lucien Favre, that when Dortmund take the lead, they don't really pursue the next goal. And at some point, Favre is not one that makes a lot of substitutions. And usually when he makes late substitutions, he brings on defenders. So that usually means Dortmund withdraw even further. And that has cost them already a couple of points in the league, because they conceded late equalizers just by simply standing very deep into their own box. So if I say that Dortmund will play on the back foot, it actually might not work out too well for them if they play like they would maintain a lead. Because if you talk about the mindset of Inter having to win and Dortmund being fine with a draw, that sort of gives Dortmund a mental lead. So
yeah, no, it does, because 1 point versus 4, and then you have 2 games against each other in a row. So and be going to Westfalenstadion with a task of having to win, then you will lose. Like you said, Dortmund are known for their counterattacks, and I think this is really. I just wanted to touch a little bit about Mats Hummels, who's one of my favorite central defenders. Is he injured, or is he just being frozen out, or is it what's going on there?
He's just really slow.
He's always been slow, but like, what's the problem there, Stefan? Like, is he injured, or is it a guts situation?
What do you mean in the Germany team?
Yeah, no. I mean for BVB Hummels, because he hasn't been playing recently, has he?
No, he played. He played pretty well last Saturday. He's been playing.
Okay, cool. No, I just got my stats wrong then.
Sorry.
Okay, so how's he been since he returned? Because he's been there's been quite talks. With Jogi Löw kicking him out, and then him leaving Bayern Munich to return back to Dortmund. What are you thinking there?
Well, I think it's a massive gain for Dortmund. He has consistently been one of Dortmund's best players, and as you well know, if you say he's one of your favorite players, he is one of the best center backs when it comes to build-up play. And even though his pace isn't great, his positional play, the way he anticipates, is just still world class. So I'm very happy that he is back at Dortmund. It was a bit of a controversial move for some Dortmund fans because of his Bayern pass, but I can see past it, especially because he was with Dortmund beforehand for 7 long years. So it's not like he is disloyal or anything. And so far it has worked out brilliantly. And I do wonder now if he gets an invite back to the German national team, even though Joachim Löw, the Germany coach, said just a week or so ago that there is no way back for Hummels, because Niklas Süle picked up an ACL tear and is out for the rest of the season, or most stretches of it, which is obviously a huge blow for Bayern in the title race in the Bundesliga, because he is their best defender, I would say, next to Jerome Boateng. So we'll see if Hummels makes a comeback to the German national team, but from a Dortmund perspective, it might actually be good that he doesn't, because he does not need shouldn't play too many games, because it's better if he is well rested. he is already, I think, 30 or 31 years old. So please rest Mats Hummels.
So what are your predictions going into this game then? What do you think is going to happen on Wednesday?
I believe it's going to be a very cagey affair, and I think it's going to be like a 1-1 game or so. I've seen Inter a couple of times. I've seen them play in the Champions League against Slavia and against Barcelona, and I have to say they can be very impressive and unimpressive at the same time. Against Slavia, that was a really lackluster performance. I don't know if it was down to arrogance. I think you've probably discussed it a little bit better than I can grasp, but I thought Inter were very much overwhelmed with Slavia's pressing against Barcelona. They actually deserve to lead and take more than I think a point at least. So I'm very excited, but I think it's a game where two teams are very similar in their approach to the game. So maybe they just neutralize each other for 90 minutes. So my prediction actually would be a draw.
Well, that would be the ideal result for BFLB, given that Inter are virtually out then, because they are going to the.
Well, the ideal result actually would be a win, because I wouldn't put it past Dortmund to lose at home to Inter.
Well, I guess so. Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Stefan. And if people want to follow you on Twitter, if you got something coming out that you want to promote, then go right ahead.
Well, people can follow me at Stefan Buczko. They can follow the Yellow Wall Pod on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Just type in Yellow Wall Pod, or find our website on theyellowwall.net, which would be very swell. We've got a couple of previews coming on. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the game. Thank you for having me, and Critty, I wish you all the best.
Great pleasure to have you. Thanks.
Same to you, Stefan. Great to be on with you again.
Yeah, Michael, can you please fill me in what this picture in your room means? I'm very intrigued.
I will send it as soon as I still don't know what it means, but I mean, it's here, and I'll send a picture. I don't know why it's here, but it's here, and I'm glad it's here.
Yeah, we need to find out what the hell that is about. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on.
But thank you for coming on, Stefan. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Nice talking to you.
Thanks, Stefan.
Cheers.
Ciao. Thanks. Right. Let's continue. I mean, I thought that for me, I think that Inter. This is it. You know, this is it. Inter have to win this. They have to try and go and win this, because after you know, if they don't win this, then I think they should just punt it, because I don't want Inter to play in the Europa League under any circumstances. I want Inter's focus to be the Serie A and to try to win a title via winning the Coppa Italia or something like that. But because Inter have literally 5-10% chances of winning the Champions League. Let's not kid ourselves. So if they can't go through, I want Inter to punt it.
Nima, if I may say something.
Go for it.
So there's something Inter should take advantage of. There's a problem right now that's been brewing with Borussia Dortmund. This mentalitäts issue, which is after the Frankfurt match, in which Borussia Dortmund went up 1-0 and then were equalized, and then went up 2-1 and then were again equalized. Marco Reus, there's been this talk about this temper tantrum that allegedly happened from many's point of views, that he was visibly frustrated, and he was talking. They asked him, this question about the mentality of the team. They're weak mentally. They cannot, and this is what Stefan was talking about with these 1-0 leads and 2-1 advantages that basically Dortmund are almost ripe to concede when they go up. So, I think there's with Favre being on the hot seat, and I think he is more so than a lot of people realize. You would look at a team that's 1 point off of the top of the table. They just beat Borussia Mönchengladbach, who are the current number one team in Germany. I mean, I know that on paper they're not, but in the table they are number one. They beat them 1-0 at home, clean sheet. But there are still underlying issues. And Inter, for once, it looks like Inter may be the calmer side going into a match against a team in such a high. I would say this is a very high stakes game against Borussia Dortmund, because the Götze issue is an issue. A lot of people, don't know whether they want to support Hummels or not. There's a very split camp on that. A lot of people took issue with the way that Reus handled some of these questions with the mentality thing. And then, of course, there's Lucien Favre himself, who is trying to do the best he can with his tactics, but might not necessarily fit the actual players that he has in his squad. So Inter are, if I look at, I've followed both teams obviously this season, especially in Serie A play and league play. Inter are the more, I would say, informed side right now. Take the Juve match out of it. I think that Inter are much more composed, I will say, under Conte than Dortmund are under Favre. So that's something to keep an eye on. Inter have a chance to really save their Champions League season in this match.
They sure do. But are you on board with that, Mo? That Inter should punt it if they don't win against BFV on Wednesday?
Yeah, I think we spoke about it the last time on the pod post Barca. I think this is the one match where the final push of effort, if any, for the Champions League. I don't know about punting it, because I don't know if clearly the Coppa Italia is a more attainable objective than the Europa League would be. But at the same time, I think maybe Conte might be a bit more motivated to go for the Europa League with all the press deriding him on his inability to perform and to translate his domestic records into continental ones. I really don't know. Look, all I know is, we'll have this talk next week on the pod post match. I think the focus now should mostly be on going in and putting whatever's left in the gas tank for the Champions League allocation into the match on Wednesday. It's also abhorrent that 2 matches in we only have 1 point to show. Surely it's a very tough group. So I think we need the 3 points, and once the 3 points come, we take it from there. And if they don't, then we also reassess and see what realistically we can do with the 2 domestic competitions. So. Again, just the short answer is, I think we'll talk about it next week, but I also think that talking of punting pre-game might distract from the importance of the match, which is very, very high. That's it.
Okay. Mike, what about, where are you? Punt, yay or nay?
Well, what I can say is I don't think it's going to happen. Like, if they lose or tie to Dortmund, I don't think they go in with the intentions of just trying to throw the remaining 3 games. I can tell you that's not going to happen. However, for the greater good, it obviously could be a better thing for the Scudetto chances, no doubt about it, in the grand scheme of things. But it's just you just can't go into. There's no way Conte's going to go in there and throw starting 11 out there that's not even close to remotely what it should be. I just could never see that happening. And I think it would be better if we finished 4th and 3rd, of course. But at the end of the day, if Inter goes into the Europa League, they would probably be one of the favorites to win, and they've been the favorites before. Among them at least in years past, but they never really did anything with it. Obviously, this year's a little better than in previous years when they've been in the Europa League, but. Personally, I would prefer they did, but I just would never see it happening.
Well, yeah, no, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. I don't think Inter would, and it would be contrary of everything that Suning have ever done, pretty much. So I think you're absolutely right. I just personally think that Europa League would cost more than it actually gives, because even if Inter were to win it, I still think that. I don't know. It just feels more attainable, and for me, Inter have to have a consistent season in the Serie A where they're never lower than 2nd place. You know what I mean? To kind of build that winners mentality. And I just think traveling to the Ukraine and Russia and Hungary and Turkey and all that disrupts how Conte wants to work. In terms of given it's better to travel within Italy than it is to travel to the Ukraine, for example. Right.
Sorry, Nima, but yeah, I think you're right in that sort of sense, in the sense that the toil, the physical toil that it takes on the squad, and also the importance of having a non-Pazza season where, like you say, we consistently are in 2nd or above for the entire season. So in that respect, I agree with you completely. It's just like Michael also said, I don't know how like Michael and you said, how that, seeing that it's so contradictory or contrary to the DNA of both Conte and Suning and what they've done so far, how that's even possible,
No, exactly. Yeah, go Critty.
Yeah, I think the Serie A takes precedence right now over anything internationally. I think the domestic solidification of Inter as being truly being the top two. So it's a two-team league in Juve and Inter. I think that's the most important thing right now. Take a page from the team that knocked Inter out of the Europa League last season, which was Eintracht Frankfurt. They were sitting in Champions League spot the entire season pretty much. They got to the semifinals of the Europa League and they just got tired. They just shut down. And granted, the Inter have more depth than Frankfurt, but I'd rather Inter solidify themselves in the top two and possibly challenge for the Scudetto late, because Juve is going to be playing Champions League football well into next spring. Maybe that works in Inter's favor. When Chelsea won, correct me if I'm wrong, when Chelsea won the Premier League 2-3 years ago, whenever it was, they didn't play in Europe. Conte had the entire domestic campaign all to itself.
Exactly.
So he was able to take Chelsea past City, past Liverpool, past United, past Arsenal, and worry only about one thing. It's not the end of the world. Let me tell you, it's not the end of the world if Inter don't beat Dortmund in these next two games. If they just, I don't want to say punt. Obviously, I agree with Michael. They're not going to just go out there and lose 6-0 to Prague or Barcelona. But yeah, it's not the focus. Conte says, look, okay, we didn't get, Europe will come one day, but let's go ahead. Let's punch Juve in the mouth. Let's show the rest of the league that we mean business. So I think that's what takes precedence right now, and that's what Conte is going to focus on.
Yeah, I hope you're right, because that's kind of where I think Inter need to start, because I think otherwise you risk of doing what Napoli have done, and that is that you're not focused on anything, so you end up being semi-decent everywhere. They're not a contender in the Serie A now. They're not a contender in Europe. They're decent. That's all they are.
Yep.
And that's what I'm kind of afraid of. Right. I think it's a pretty meaningless stat, but it's a stat anyway that I wanted to hear your reactions to. Inter have played Borussia Dortmund 4 times in Europe. In the semi-final of the European Cup Champions League in 1964, 2-2 away, 2-0 at the San Siro. And in the quarterfinal of the Europa League in 93, or UEFA Cup 93-94, where Inter won 3-1 away and lost 2-1 at the San Siro, went through. Anyway, both of those occasions, Inter went on to win both of those tournaments. They won the European Cup in 64 and they won the UEFA Cup in 94, in a season where they were almost relegated, by the way. It was a crazy season. I want to hear your reactions to this. I mean, obviously it doesn't mean anything today, but given that, you have bogey teams such as Schalke, Dortmund's worst enemies. Schalke are Inter's bogey team for sure. What is your immediate thought when you hear that, Mo? Being a fellow aficionado of history as I am.
Look, I don't know. I think it's far more likely that we do damage in the league than in the Champions League. So I'm as romantic as that stat sounds. I don't think it's applicable this year. I think if we do something in the Champions League and if we get past Dortmund, then it'd probably be like at best a quarterfinal place. But like you say, it's a nice stat to look back on.
Sure is. You Critty, you're both an Inter fan and a BFL fan, so I'm keen to hear what you think on that about that. I mean, is it just like a funny little stat, or do you think that the power? I mean, obviously in football we talk about the power of history and all that. What are the chances here? I mean, do you think that streak will break now?
I definitely think the streak will break. I look back at 64 and obviously 93, 94. The competitions were much smaller at that time. So you had less opponents that you had to deal with. So I mean, the 64 you're talking, and let's not forget 64. You're talking Grande Inter. I mean, you're talking the
sure.
best Inter squads that maybe ever were. I mean, you got to obviously Mourinho's can contend with that, but I mean, this is going back to truly the golden era. 93-94 is interesting because that's when Lothar Matthäus and Klinsmann and all of them had left. Bremen, they were all gone, and let's see, Matthäus left in 93, 92, I think.
Yeah, 92, yeah.
So 93, 94, I think the German trio were all gone by then, if I'm not mistaken. It was right before then, or either that same season. And yeah, it was an Inter side that I think ended up finishing 13th or 14th, and we're in the relegation battle for most of this the latter part of the season.
For sure.
And they won the UEFA Cup. They go ahead and win the damn UEFA Cup. So
if that is not the quintessential Pazza Inter to get relegated to this, almost relegated to the Serie B, they secured, I think they secured Serie A football on like the last day, and then they go and win the UEFA Cup, which back then was the teams 2 to 5 in the top leagues. I mean,
does anybody know? Does anybody know in 93-94 if the rule was in effect that if you win the UEFA Cup that you gain automatic entrance to the Champions League?
You do in the Europa League, yes.
I'm saying, was that rule in effect in 94?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
Because I was gonna say Pazza Inter would be playing in Serie B, but playing in the Champions League. That would be Pazza Inter.
that is quintessentially Pazza Inter. 92-93 was Matthias Sammer played 92-93 in Inter for 6 months before they sent him back to Borussia Dortmund. Actually. That's right. Yeah.
Where he then later won the Champions League and the Ballon d'Or.
Yeah, and was won the captain Germany to the European Championships as well.
Correct, you are, sir. Yes, you are correct.
Yeah. No, it's crazy, isn't it? Right. Speaking of Pazza Inter, Antonio Conte said he wanted to beat the Pazza out of Inter when he first took over, but I guess he was feeling pretty confident about that. 73 minutes into the game against the Sassuolo, but then Inter entered themselves by completely stopping to play, and the substitution. I think Conte has to take a little bit of blame for that as well, because Valentino Lazaro, oh my God, I don't want to write him off, and I was a little bit angry when I tweeted out that he's not the new Dalbert, he's the new Dodo. I was a little bit pissed off when I tweeted that out, because my God, those 17 minutes were right up there with some of the worst performances I have seen in an internship by any player. And the fact that he plays as a winger for the Austrian national team, Mo, have we once again spent a crap load of money on a player that is completely useless? In the position he's bought for to play.
It would seriously seem like it. I mean, we've seen him play twice, and both times, once he was underwhelming, and the other one, which is last Sunday, he was absolutely atrocious. And you say, he's not Dalbert, he's Dodo, but really, Dalbert's performance against Empoli in the last game of the season last year was worse than anything that Dodo had put in. So,
you sure about that?
Yeah. No, really. That was throwing away the Champions League at home to relegation contenders in the last goal. Bad. That was epically terrible. But yeah, jokes aside, look, I don't know. The sample size is so small with Lazaro. I don't know. We've seen him twice. Both times he hasn't looked very good. Both Candreva and D'Ambrosio are ahead of him in the pecking order so far. Neither of whom have been particularly amazing players historically, particularly at Inter. So the signs do point to him. Whether it's just a first season blues or new system blues or whatever, but it's clear that he's definitely having a hard time to adjust. He's young, so hopefully it's just a matter of adjustment, and he finds his way in the second half of the season, and we really see what all the potential that was hyped up about, all the hype that we came with. But yeah, at this point in time, it does seem like we've bought ourselves a lemon.
Oh God! For the millionth time this past decade, when it comes to the fullback position, why couldn't they just buy Lazzari? Never mind. Right. But speak. I mean, what about you guys? Critty, are you ready to throw in the towel on Lazzaro, or do you think it's like Mo said, maybe implied that this is just first season blues or whatever?
Yeah, no, it's way too early to throw in a towel on someone in October. I think that Inters keep looking for Maicon. I mean, this is like we had fullbacks that were great for so long, and then sometimes you look at all sports, not just football, but basketball, hockey. It takes time when you have elite, world class talent at these positions. It takes time to build these, and I think that Conte is he spots something, has an eye for something, and I think that over time he can build it. I mean, he was instrumental in a lot of the Chelsea players' developments and their strengths and stuff. I think that you have to give somebody more time than 2 months. And while his performances, although they've been sparse, have also not been impressive, that's it shows if a player can go back to the training ground, mentally toughen up, go out there, show the coach that he can train well, he's going to make an effort, put his best foot forward. That I think that over time the trust will build back again. To pull the plug on someone after, I mean, we don't even make it to the next transfer window. That's way too early. I still have hope that he can pan out.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen him in the Bundesliga, and this was a player that, if for Hertha Berlin, and this was a player that Conte specifically asked for. I don't know. What about you, Mike? Do you think that at some point before before your grandchildren are born, we will see someone replace Maicon on the right side of defense in a satisfactory manner?
No, I think when my grandchildren are born, we'll still be waiting for Maicon to come back, or hopefully it's Maicon's grandchildren that are playing for us now.
Nice one.
That's what I think we're gonna have to be waiting.
It's crazy.
I mean, look, very, very small sample size so far. Very small sample size, only a couple matches. So, and minutes have been very tight. Look, I think to get a good view on a player, you need to have double-digit matches before I make a decision. And yeah, we haven't looked like the player that we're hoping for yet, but it's way too quick. What I didn't like from him yesterday is that he didn't really make much of an effort on the Sassuolo third goal. I believe he just kind of ran back, didn't make an effort. He could have made a play on the ball before it was shot, but that's something that I need much more of an effort to try to stop these counterattacks, which Sassuolo was doing at the end there. So I'm hoping that he gets some good playing time when say matches are out of say up 2-3-0, and get him in there. But we've got lots of time left, and there'll be plenty of opportunities for him to prove himself the rest of the season for sure.
I hope you're right.
Nima, one more thing.
Yeah.
Nima, one more thing on him. Coming from Hertha Berlin, who plays in front of a half-empty Olympiastadion in Berlin, he's coming into an atmosphere where there's 70,000 people. It's the San Siro is such an intimidating environment for both home and away, because you have the pressure of the fans that when you're in the blue, when they're in the Nerazzurri shirt, that you have to go out there and perform. And then on top of that, Hertha Berlin is not a contender in the Bundesliga. He had such a much more relaxed approach to things with very little pressure. If Hertha gets in the top 10 of the table, that's a massive success for them. So it's going to take time. I think we look at these players so many times as on paper, we look at their FIFA rating or something like that. And that doesn't always translate into the human side of things with, when you're talking about temperament, when you're talking about your mentality, when you're talking about work ethic. So I would just say to everyone, that thinks it's a bust or we spent money on fullback. By the way, does Facchetti have any grandsons? Can we, if we're going down the train of Maicon, maybe Facchetti has some grandsons we can put in the at fullback. Maybe there's some inter DNA there that we can put in. But I mean, but just be patient with this kid. He was very good at Hertha, and like you said, Conte specifically targeted him. And if he does that, I'm stuck with Conte, so I'm going to support the guy. Okay. That's just facts. I'm going to let him manage the team and do his job. And I got to give the guy at least till May of this season. Get one complete season under your belt before I can say, hey, throw him away.
Okay, no, that's true. That's true. Right before, let's just briefly. I thought we should talk about the game after BVB, which is against Parma on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. And this is a Parma where I think a Parma side that has one of the most exciting prospects in all of Europe. A 19-year-old, an 18-year-old Dejan Kulusevski of Swedish. He's a Swedish citizen, but of Montenegrin heritage. And this guy is ripping it apart in the Serie A right now. And there's already talks of Inter and Juve and Barcelona, etc., all scouting this guy. I think this is one, and given how the game will look, meaning that Inter will probably dominate possession and Parma will probably have to counterattack. That speaks to both Gervinho and Kulusevski's strengths. And of course, they have an Andreas Cornelius, who's a strong player. No, this is a game where I think is a trap game for Inter. I mean, I know we keep saying this is a test for Inter, etc. But I really do think that these games against Parma, like the one we saw against Sassuolo, these are the games where Conte's Inter have to show whether or not they are the real deal, whether or not they are players that, whether or not they have changed, or there's at least a seed planted towards something that could be a new Inter. And I'm not entirely convinced, especially after the 17 minutes against Sassuolo. So, what do you guys think? What's your prediction to going into this game, Michael?
Well, look, they scored 5 goals on the weekend. That's no fluke. That's I watched the highlights after the Inter game, and that's I think they've got a quality squad. I mean, they've got good players. I mean, Roberto Iglesias played in Serie A for so long, and Cornelius he scored yesterday too. I'm not going to take this lightly, especially coming off a Champions League week. I wouldn't doubt if they played Inter to a draw. I mean, I would be more comfortable making a prediction to see what happens with Dortmund first. I think that is going to have a huge impact in terms of morale against Parma. So I mean, if Inter go and beat Dortmund and kind of their Champions League hopes are back on, then maybe that'll help morale going into the weekend. But coming off a team that just scored 5 goals against Jets, something to be a little worried about for sure. And I'm definitely not taking them lightly at all. I mean, what do you guys think?
I'm gonna pass that to you, Critty, real quick.
Okay, yeah, it sucks that we're sitting here 21 points, 1 point back of Juve, 4 points ahead of Atalanta for second place, and we're still sitting here with this. Man, I hope the old Inter doesn't show up, and it sucks, but I understand it. I do understand it, and I agree with you guys. It's we have only a small taste test of everything so far. The season's still very young. I have seen though so much improvement. Take those 17 minutes from last week out of the equation. Let's look at the entire season so far, okay? And specifically domestically. I've seen so much improvement and so much mental focus and determination from this side over the Spalletti teams and even the Mancini teams from just a few years ago. This side seems more confident. They seem to be able to pick apart these small teams that they have traditionally been landmines for Inter over the past 5 years. Yes, Parma scored 5 goals. It was against 19th place Genoa, so take that with a grain of salt. No disrespect to Genoa, no disrespect to Parma, but you are what your record says you are, and Genoa's not very good. Yeah, they have Gervinho, they have Roberto Iglesias, they have some players, but if I'm looking at Inter, if I'm looking at Conte hit with this 3-5-2, they should be able to defensively certainly minimize 5 goals. And this is a team that Inter should confidently go in and get 3 points against. This is the team you have to beat, these teams, in order to compete for the Scudetto, and I think that's exactly what they will do.
Yeah, I hope you're right. What about you, Mo? Give us your thoughts and then a prediction, and then quick. I'll ask the other guys as well.
Yeah, I'm very strange territory today because I find myself agreeing with Critty, not because of anything, but because usually
I knew I'd get you. I knew I'd get you eventually. I got you finally. We're finally on the same page, brother.
Yeah. But I think it's actually because you moved on to my to the light side, not for me moving to the dark side.
Well, who thought that Conte would bring me into the light side? Who knew?
Yeah.
Darth Conte brings to the force, you know. So it's amazing. Yeah, no, I pretty much agree with everything you said right there. This talk, you know, it's like brands and labels are very difficult to shake off, you know. And this Pazza Inter thing is a thing, but you know, Sassuolo is such a bad match to play, and mid-afternoon or early afternoon Sassuolo, midday Sassuolo away is such a bad game to play. And we were ahead by 4-1, and just, you know, like you said, a 17-minute lapse in poor defending led to less than comfortable ending to the match. But it's a match that we won, you know, I'd have to say comfortably from minute whatever, from minute 0 to minute from minute 1 to minute 73. If my maths is correct. I don't think there's a Pazza Inter. I think Parma are going to be the ones who look at the Inter side and say, oh damn, you know, we have to go all the way to San Siro to face the now resurgent juggernauts of the Serie A, and we're scared, and Conte, you know. And I agree with you guys in like maybe the midweek fixture has an impact on the mentality or maybe the team selection. But by and large, I don't think this is going to be a troubling match. I think we're going to win, maybe not comfortably, but we're just going to do like we did against against Cagliari. Just control a match, play, score, maybe not run away with the game at 4-0 in halftime, but you know, a nice 2-0 win never hurt anyone, and you know, no one can complain at that. You know, so that's what I think the match is going to be. I think it's going to be a 2-0 win, and I would imagine we'd see less of either Lukaku or Lautaro. So one of these two guys is probably going to take a rest, and we might see Politano starting from the very beginning and maybe even get on the score sheet himself. So yeah, that's where I stand. Let's see.
I'm gonna say 3-2 Inter. I think Cornelius and Kulusevski are going to score, and I think Inter will score 3 because I think Inter have a problem in their defense that isn't easily fixed, and this is something that Conte needs to work on during the next international break. There's something there that's not clicking. So I think Inter will concede twice. I think Inter will win. I think Lukaku will continue to score. And I think we'll see a goal from the midfield. I think Barella, if he plays. Hopefully Sensi, but it doesn't look like he will. What about you? Just quickly, Critty, give me your prediction and scores.
I'm not. You beat me to it. I was actually going for 3-2 the entire time. I think it's a 3-2 Inter win. I think the Inter goes to 24 points. And I think I agree with you. I think it's Lukaku. I think Lukaku scores a brace in this game.
What about you, Mike?
Yeah, quickly. I think it'll be a 3-1 game. But I'd be a little more comfortable making that prediction once this Dortmund game is over. Quickly, I'll say I know we haven't mentioned yet, but that Lukaku goal that he scored, beautiful. That's the goal that I know Lukaku of, and I've seen many times in the past. That big physical possession check in, and that was a beautiful ball. Although, you know, that was the space, but Dervey, and it came in perfectly. He found the space, and that's the kind of goal that I would hope to see more. Even if he didn't score there, that's the type of ball that I want to see more and more and more, especially because he can bully a guy like he did in that play. So, I mean, if Lukaku playing, I could expect him to hopefully.
No, I agree 100% because I saw, in my opinion, I think that is the Lukaku that Conte wanted, and to see him just turn like that, it was Vieri-esque, this kind of back against the goal and then in an instant turnaround and then boom, goal in the back of the net. No, it was beautiful, and it's clear that he's not bothered by that back injury anymore. So that was good to see. Right, let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football, starting with the with the positivity, which will be presented by not Mr. Positivity this week. We're moving things around. This week's Moratti, which will be presented by Mr. Michael Gallo.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and He surprised people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person all these qualities.
So my Moratti of the week over on the weekend and Saturday, I was able to go to the Toronto FC DC United game. Toronto FC won 5-1 in extra time, which, by the way, I don't think I've ever seen 4 goals in extra time, and at least from my recent memory. And in that match, it was Wayne Rooney, and I haven't been the biggest Wayne Rooney supporter over the years, but that was it looks like that is his last ever match that he'll play before retiring. Look, he's had a great career, 200 Premier League goals. You know, that's say the greatest career with England, but you know, scored 4 goals in Euro 2004. He's, you know, probably been the poster boy of England for the last 15 to 18 years. It's unfortunate that he kind of went out, didn't really have a good game. He was pretty much almost playing left back in that game, which was kind of weird to see. But it's a pretty good career from Rooney. I'd say in the last 20 years, one of the best players that we've seen, and I do respect him. Like I said, he wasn't one of my favorite players, but good to see him go out. Had some trouble over the years with off the field stuff, but definitely a respectable player over the years. And now that he's done, we'll see where his next position is. I'm sure he'll be coaching somewhere in the next couple of years. And hats off to him, and a great career for sure.
Agreed. Wayne Rooney is definitely one of those players who I think. I mean, he's the top scorer. I think he's the number 1 scorer in all of English history in terms for the national team, and he's a legend. I mean, it's not just the fact that he scored amazing goals. It was also the fact that he was such a team player. I mean, when United won the Champions League, he basically played like as a left wing back for them,
and that's what he was doing for DC United. On Saturday.
Such a loyal player.
Loyal player. He's playing all over the midfielder. And by the way, he scored obviously one of the greatest goals in Premier League history in that derby against Man City. So that's a goal that we can always remember him by that trademark. It was like a scissor kick that he scored, and it's definitely a very memorable goal.
For sure. Happy retirement, great career. Right, let's move on to something much more negative. This week's Moggi, which will be presented by Mr. Positivity, Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
Yeah, so again, I find myself in familiar territory in this same episode, and I'm been tasked with finding the Moggi of the week. And again, in the same episode, I'm bashing on English football-related stuff, and it's all this this noise and nonsense about VAR in the Premier League. So the first, it's a double sort of Moggi. The first component of it is how the Premier League decided to use VAR, which is basically use VAR in a manner that, you know, nullifies VAR. So as I understand, the application of VAR in the Premiership is such that the VAR, the video assisted referee himself, does not really ever rule out or rule against the on-field referees' decisions. So basically what they do is they show the entire stadium that the referees made a mistake, and then they show that the referee continues to persist with the mistake without overruling him. So why have VAR in the first place when clear mistakes aren't going to be turned, or clear erroneous decisions aren't going to be turned over? So that's my first problem with VAR, because I think VAR has been great. I love VAR. I think VAR has been, you know, not without controversy or not without growing pains, but by and large, VAR has been a great addition to the international game, and it's been a great addition to the Serie A. I feel much more secure in results and much happier and content, even though there might be time wasted, etc. So when the most watched, most viewed league in the world makes such a mess out of the application of VAR, this entire system globally takes such a big hit. Now add to that or compound that with the fact that every damn pundit on TV in England seems to have a personal vendetta against VAR and the problems with VAR and VAR this and VAR, where in fact, the problem isn't with the system, it's the application of the system. It's not that you can't say adding more cameras to find mistakes is bad in spotting mistakes. It certainly is a good thing in spotting mistakes. It's what you choose to do with the information, with the system, whether that's applied correctly or not is the problem. So if your goal is to minimize those refereeing mistakes, those avoidable refereeing mistakes, and you implement the VAR system to do so, then you're moving in the right direction. Now, it's not VAR's problem that you've instated a set of rules that basically handcuffs the VAR system from using this information that they get and applying it properly. That's not the system's fault. That's the rules' fault. And having this being the third season of Calcio that we see with VAR, I feel like all this noise, this narrative coming out of England is just such a backward step for the system, and it really pissed me off. So that's my Moggi of the week.
Shouting at the VAR system for it not being applied consistently or not working properly is about as intelligent as shouting at your toaster for burning your toast. That's just the level of the intelligence that we're talking about here. If you're the kind of person who likes to scream at your stove for burning your food, then go right ahead, have fun, have at it, Haas. But if you're not, and you're a sane person and you understand that it's not the technology's fault, it's how it's being applied, then let's have a discussion. Right, let's move on to something much more comical, this week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. Critty Smith.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
All right, so staying with the Borussia Dortmund theme, we're going back to a former player of Borussia Dortmund who transferred there, did not have the best of times, but he now finds himself back in the friendly confines of the Serie A. This past weekend, won Ciro Immobile. He's known for scoring goals, but let me just narrate you through this. He scores his goal, and I mean this made for those of you who want to understand, like this made like Sports Center like not top tens. This is like for American sports shows, they don't even acknowledge football. Well, they acknowledge another kind of football, but not this football. This actually made some highlights over here. So this is pretty world famous at this point. So he scores his goal. And he runs off to celebrate. He's running towards the what would be his left side of the pitch, and he's going so parallel to goal. And he's trying the damnedest to get his shirt off. He's trying to unravel his shirt from his head. His shirt gets stuck on his head. He trips over his own feet, loses his footing, falls straight on the pitch, then proceeds to get back up with his shirt still on his head, and then eventually gets to pull the shirt off. With then getting a yellow card from the referee in greatest fashion you could possibly imagine. This is
the quintessential Frog.
Yes. So this, as Nima put it earlier, this is like he out Ranocchia'd himself on this particular instance. So yeah, so this week's Frog has got to go to Ciro Immobile for his. In a positive moment, making that positive moment even more positive by bringing all of us into laughter.
Indeed, it was. I mean, and the fact that he scored that 3-3 goal against Atalanta in the last minute, and it's such a dramatic game, and then he can't even. It's comedy. It's Comedy Central, right? I'd like to thank Stefan Buczko for coming on one more time. The Yellow Wall Pod on Twitter. Definitely check it out if you want to get acquainted with Borussia Dortmund in English. It's definitely the best pod out there. And I'd also like to thank Michael Gallo for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. And right now I'm off to find out what this sign means. So hopefully yes. I get a decision from somebody.
Keep
Thank
us
you very
posted.
much, guys.
Keep us posted. Keep us posted. Right. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Positivity, Mr. Mo Nassar.
Thank you, Nima. Thank you, team. Always a pleasure.
And welcome, and our dear good friend, Mr. Critty Smith. Hope to have you back soon. Again, probably, definitely, we'll try to have you again before the next Dortmund game. Good to have you.
Yeah, I'm trying to get everything sorted out, but it was great to be back home on the SempreInter podcast, and Studio Inter off of SempreInter. Sorry, I get my Sempres and my studios mixed up. But yeah, it's been a blast being back on with you guys.
It's good to have you. And as always, I'm your host Nima Tavallaey, wishing you a good week, 6 points, and sempre e solo Forza Inter.